The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
you're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon. Where should we begin? Scalia, Trump. Should I say Chump or Trump? Scalia, Trump, or Cruz? And we could flip a coin because each of them have managed to do something unbelievably offensive. Actually, no, I think they're all offensive and all ignorant. Where should we start? I don't know. I don't know where I'm starting, but I'm going to start by saying hello. It is December 9th, 2015, Wednesday night. Thank you so much for joining me. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you decided to be here with me, and I don't take that for granted. If you want to join the conversation, you can, 857-600-0518. I look forward to reading your chats in the chat room, and I look forward to read on YouTube, as well as the chat inside of Spreaker. Now that all the formalities are out of the way, and actually, you know what? I'm not going to start by giving them my energy just yet. I'll give them my energy in a minute. I want to start with the Progressive Army. I want to applaud the Progressive Army. I want to applaud the Progressive Army in concept and the each and every one of you who participate, who watch the videos, who watch live or after the fact, who listen to the podcast, who read the articles, and you're out there fighting the good fight, right? You're out there fighting for the right thing. I want to thank you guys. And I left my phone on across the room, so it'd probably be chirping all night. So somewhere in here, I'll try to get a break and go and cut my phone off. But yeah, so thanks to you guys. Now, housekeeping, I guess, you know what I want to do? I need your help. I need everyone listening, everyone watching. I actually honestly do need your help because for the most part, I am a one-man show. And damn it, we put together a really good show, right? We do it, right? We have some decent production in terms of video, but audio. We have your live callers. We do this. And I bring you solid content. I was listening to I did my homework and I watched the video of Rachel Maddow with Bernie Sanders last night, and I listened to a good portion of the show, and it dawned on me, Rachel Maddow was saying some of the exact things last night at 9 o'clock as I was saying last night at 9 o'clock. So it's good to be in good company, right? Even some of her deeper analysis, talking about the Overton window, talking about Donald Trump really not saying anything different than Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz for that matter. It's amazing to hear someone of her, she has a PhD in political science. So I don't respect her so much because she's on MSNBC. I respect her because of her intellect, but it's good to know that the stuff that you're getting here at the Benjamin Dixon Show is up there in terms of content, in terms of analysis with Rachel Maddow. If you listened to Rachel last night and you compared it to my show, we were hitting some of the same points, and I obviously could not have watched her show while she was doing it live, and I was doing mine live. All right. I said all that to say, a lot of you are requesting that we go to 2 hours. And we're inching closer and closer and closer to it. If you really want us to go to 2 hours, here's how you can help us do that. Like I said, I'm going to give my show and the Progressive Army my energy first. Then I'm going to talk about Ted Cruz and his climate denial. And then I'm going to talk about Scalia and his racism that he doesn't even know is racism. And then I'm going to talk about Trump, and more important than just Trump, I'm going to talk about this idea of Bernie Sanders going after the Trump vote. So I'm coming to all that. But let me do this first. I don't sell myself well enough. I need your help. I either need your financial contribution, become a Patreon, or I need your social media contribution to help spread the word, or maybe some of you actually have some skill sets that you want to contribute to the show and you want to become a part of it. However you can help out, hit me up, because if we build this, we can really take on this. We can take on conservatism from a different perspective. And I can be your champion. I can go out there and do the damn thing. If you guys go to Patreon, I've set up a goal. If we hit that goal, I will commit to going to 2 hours a night. It really would only take a handful of you giving $1, $2, $5, or $10 on a monthly basis, and we can hit that goal. And I will make the personal commitment to you guys to go to 2 hours a night. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way. Yeah, Rachel Maddow has a PhD in political science. I'm almost done with my PhD in international security, international development, with a concentration on international security. So my PhD is basically going to be in international relations theory, looking at the systems, global systems, the how do we cooperate in anarchy, and then more specifically drill down to how do developing nations grow and thrive in the midst of security dilemmas. So that's kind of where my PhD lies. So, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's not even education so much that education definitely helps, but it's the desire to know, and it's that natural desire to ask questions that really gives you a voice and a position and an analysis that most people don't, that a lot of people, I can't say most, but a lot of people don't have. Inquisitiveness is really, really key, asking the right questions. So with that being said, I'm just reading comments already across the board. PJ Breitz is over there. I see Bryce is in Spreaker. Hello to everyone on Spreaker. Let me get down to business. First name I see over here on the right, that's what I'm going to talk about. Boom. Justice Scalia. All right. That's the first name I saw. Justice Scalia. In a case this morning, I believe it was this morning. It had to be this morning. Yes. In a case this morning dealing with affirmative action, Justice Scalia cited a study that attempts to demonstrate that African Americans perform poorly once they're placed inside of a university because of affirmative action. He took that study, and I'm giving you the background because we can handle the background here, right? Everyone did. How can I say this? We didn't rush to call him a racist. When I called him the racist, it was in the full context of everything I'm getting ready to say. But I have to unpack it just for intellectual integrity. I have to unpack it fully. So he was citing a study that suggested that African Americans perform poorly once they're accepted into a university based on affirmative action instead of their regular whatever. There's a case before them of a white woman who was suing because she was not accepted into a university, and another student was because of affirmative action. And so it's another attack on affirmative action. Now, to the study, the point of the study is that African Americans don't perform as well when they're placed in these in schools because of affirmative action. So in the proceedings today, he suggested that that African Americans would do better if they went to lower schools. And actually, I guess I can pull it up and kind of cite him, quote him verbatim. Right, that we do better. Most Black scientists don't come from top tier schools. They come from inferior schools. They come from lesser schools, I believe was his terminology. And so as I pull it up, or if somebody wants to do me a favor and shoot me a link over on Twitter so I can pull it up really quickly, the essence of what he was saying was that based on this study, he feels that it's appropriate for him to assert that affirmative action is not only bad, but it's detrimental to Black people because it puts us in schools that we're not qualified to be in. Now, for everyone who hears that, we automatically think this son of a bitch is racist. And he is. don't want you to misunderstand me. He is, but he's racist not just because of what he said. He's racist because of where he leaves the argument. Conservatives in general are comfortable leaving a conversation without ever asking why. Let's say that we're going to accept this data on its merits, right? Let's just say we're going to give that data the benefit of the doubt that African Americans who are put in schools because of affirmative action don't perform as well. Let's say we accept that data. There is always the next question of why. And in the position of a justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, in any position of responsibility, if you leave it and you assert data without the proper context, it is used because you have an agenda. Because if you don't unpack the proper context, then you leave it where it's most convenient for your ideological purposes. In other words, you don't want to understand or explain why, because if we ever unpack the why, then we will have some conversations that you're not prepared to have, that you don't want to have, that will inevitably challenge the status quo. Because if you ask the reason why African Americans may not perform as good in a university than in a university that they got into because of affirmative action, then you have to actually drill down lower beyond their skin color. Because just like there may be an African American who's not performing good, there are other African Americans who are the top of the litter, who are running the pack at every university. I went to a protest at Harvard Law School the other day, and the leaders, some of the top students in Harvard Law School are African American. So if you don't ask the question why, then not only are you being disingenuous, but you leave it out there for us to conclude that you believe the reason why is because they are Black. In other words, you believe that the reason African Americans don't perform well in these top tier schools is because they're African American. Did he say that? No, but he left that argument out there as proof of itself without even unpacking the why. So just as irresponsible as he is to put that out there, just like he left that out there for people to make their own conclusions, my conclusion is he left it there because it conveniently negates anything other than the reason being because we're Black. In other words, he would rather let everyone in America think that we just don't perform as well because we're Black than to unpack that, to unravel that. Because if you unravel it, I believe, this is my hunch, just based on all the observations that I have in education, it doesn't matter what skin color you are. What matters is your economic background. That is one of the number one indicators of how you will perform in school, is your economic background, period, hands down. But Scalia doesn't want to unpack that. Scalia doesn't want to talk about that. What he wants is to undermine affirmative action because he's been an opponent of affirmative action since Ronald Reagan appointed him. I believe it was Reagan that appointed him. He's been on the bench forever. And ever since he's been on that bench, he has been a staunch conservative, and conservatives are absolutely against the status affirmative action. He does not want to unpack the realities that the number one indicator of how a student will perform in school is economic. And then we would discuss the intersection of the reality that African Americans are disproportionately in poverty. So the adage, everyone knows it's not an adage, it's actually a principle that correlation does not equate to causation. Saying that just because there's a correlation, just because you see African Americans are not performing well at these top tier universities, if they're placed in because of affirmative action, doesn't mean the reason is because they're African American. If you unpack it, you will see that a lot of these people who are getting in to universities, for whatever reason, they're getting in coming from backgrounds where they don't have the economic privilege and all of the bells and whistles that goes along with an education when you come from a family of means. The perfect example is my brother, who produces for the show. My brother is brilliant. He's smarter than me. Right. He's smart in the sciences and math and chemistry and physics. He's smart in that regard. One of the smartest guys that I know in that area. And he had to work his way all the way through university. And the way he worked, the way he paid for school was by tutoring. Man, maybe he may not want me to say these things. I think for the sake of my, maybe I shouldn't say these things. Let's see how I can fix this up. Anyway, I'll paint it as nicely as I can, Robin. So he did it by, he paid his way through school by tutoring another student, and that student was from economic means. And regardless of where that student was, no matter if that student was completely clueless on something, he had a tutor who was there to help him every step of the way. And he had one of the smartest tutors that was there to help him every step of the way. Now you ask yourself the question, how many African Americans have access to that? Now let's drill down. How many Americans in general, regardless of color, have access to that? Your economic background is a number one indicator of how you perform. Now, here's the flip side of that argument. Not even the flip side. Here's another corner on that argument, is the fact that you take a look at people who get through Ivy League institutions, top tier schools, simply because of the resources that they have, the relationships that they have. You cannot tell me that you want to question the intellectual veracity of African Americans going to top tier schools when Harvard put out a Ted Cruz, when the University of Pennsylvania put out a Donald Trump, and George W. Bush. Where did he go? To Stanford or Yale, rather, not Stanford, Yale. They all went to Ivy League schools, and Ted Cruz doesn't even believe in the science behind evolution or climate change. So now when I unpack everything and I see that Scalia makes an argument, and he uses a racially tinged argument, and he leaves it there. He leaves the reason, he leaves the cause, he makes it seem as though the reason that Black people don't perform as well is because they're Black, because he did not bother to unpack it any further, right? Because of all of that, I just simplify it and say, this son of a bitch is racist. And he's making racist accusations, assertions that have the stereotype of hundreds of years of pseudoscience that has been put forward to try to make it seem as though African Americans are intellectually inferior. And these human beings is the only word I could think of right now. These human beings that follow that ideology and that type of thinking run around with their pseudo charts, with information, with propaganda, trying to assert that Black people just aren't smart. And now we have this being voiced from a Supreme Court justice who doesn't have the intellectual integrity enough to unpack data that he spews out in a hearing in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And so if I were to make a ruling, because of his gross negligence in using data without giving the proper context, without unpacking the data, and the method in which he used the data was to undermine something for ideological purposes, his sentence is he's a racist asshole. And that's a great reason why we really should not have lifetime tenure on the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, let's see if somebody sent me that tweet. Boom, there it is. Lesser schools, that's the word. He said lesser schools. African Americans will do better at lesser schools. You know, this is 2015. Now I can get into there's some guys on YouTube who are really mad at me. and they were mad because I guess I kind of I chumped them. You know, they were trying to troll me, and I was, you know, I called their card, and they were like, oh man, the first time somebody gives you criticism, you try to alpha mail them. And I never really considered it alpha mailing, or you know, kind of, you know, swinging my hubris, showing them how big my hubris is. But maybe it is. I said that to say the other half of me doesn't even want to have a rational argument with them. I want them to put their smartest person in the realm of political science and political commentary, put them up against me, and I'll show you who is lesser. And I'll show you that it probably has a better correlation with your political ideology than it does your race. And then you know what? That's a great segue. I guarantee you that in about 25 years, we're not going to be looking at someone's race, somebody's sexual orientation, somebody's religion. You're going to look back at their ideology. And if they identify with conservatism because of what conservatism has become, you're going to associate them with inferior intellect. Not because conservatives, there's no causation, right? There's going to be a correlation because of the Bill Moyer's article that puts it so great that there's the ascendancy of misinformation, of disinformation, where people are intentionally gravitating towards information that is intentionally put out to not only to obfuscate, if I said that correctly, the situation. And because of that, you have, I can segue over to Ted Cruz, right? You have people who are denying the science, the underlying science of climate change. They absolutely reject, I mean, not even new science. I'm talking about old science with the theory of evolution. They absolutely reject all the things that are normal, that are accepted not only by the general masses, but by the brightest minds in the world. But it's almost as though you can't be a conservative without rejecting common sense. And so while they're talking about, while Scalia is talking about African Americans perhaps need to go to lesser schools, I guarantee you in 25 to 50 years, when we look back, if they don't change right now in 2016, conservatism will be synonymous for buffoon. And that's perhaps as it should be. That's perhaps as it should be. So Ted Cruz was on NPR this morning, and I wanted to play a clip of it, but I tell you what, I'll just share the clip after the show, and you can go listen to it yourself. And he's having a conversation with Steve Inskeep, and they're discussing climate change. Everyone's discussing the Parisian climate conference, the participation of the United States, and he convened a hearing in Congress to present, I guess the nice way of saying it would be a alternate point of view. The more accurate way of saying it would be to present lies or to present propaganda for the purposes of supporting the oil industry, the power industry, the power sector that are funding Republicans, right? That's the only purpose behind it. So he has this conversation with Steve Inskeep on NPR this morning, and they start unpacking this the simple conversation of 97% of scientists conclude or agree with the science behind global warming, with climate change, whatever the hell you want to call it. I don't care what you call it. Ted Cruz, and I wish I could play it. Maybe I can play it. Maybe I can play it in segments, but I don't want to get flagged for playing copyrighted content. So I guess since I've announced that I was going to do it, maybe I just shouldn't do it. But essentially, Ted Cruz took the position of, I'm right and you're wrong. I'm right and NASA's wrong. And his justification of him being right was based on the fact that he comes from two parents that are scientists. His parents were mathematicians and some other scientists. And because of that, that makes him an authority. And he's able to speak conclusively that the data from NASA is wrong. And then he cites a study from, I believe it was the University of Alabama, that has been challenged and debunked. One study out of the many studies that looks at the same satellite imagery data. One study out of the many gives a conflicting conclusion. Everything else is on the same page. And so he takes the one piece of data, the one study that confirms his bias, and he uses that in conjunction with this. It's the trifecta of stupid, man. I'm telling you, it's one piece of data, a glimmering, shining hope for stupidity. They'll grab onto that. And then he takes the fact of his appeal to authority, and his appeal to authority is based on the fact that his parents were scientists And then he takes the propaganda machine and says that anyone who talks about global warming is a liberal politician trying to take over the government. So you get this trifecta of stupidity. And this is the nexus. This is the world that Ted Cruz operates in better than anybody else. Because so long as he can make you think that all of these scientists, they're just bought and paid by Washington, D.C., and they're all just bought and paid by liberal politicians who want to take over your job and take over your and double your energy bill. And then he speaks as though he's really confident, and he has a voice that can go up, that's qualified to go up against scientists. 97% of the scientific community. He feels that he has a voice that's qualified to challenge those because of his parents being scientists. Well, hell, my mother is a woman. Does that make me, maybe I can challenge all of the, give me a justification to challenge abortion, right? My mother's a woman, so that makes me an expert. My father was born in the 40s, so that makes me an expert on the baby boomers. And then he takes, of course, the one study that has conflicting information that scientists looked at and say this study was faulty. All this can be seen in the link I'm sharing from NPR. With that simple trifecta of stupid, he's able to gallivant around the country, challenging scientists, not other politicians so much. He's challenging scientists. He's trying to stifle the conversation. He's trying to invalidate the very notion of science, of data, to say that what you're looking at, we're looking at the same thing, and you're wrong. Your eyes are betraying me, or you. Your eyes are betraying you, and you should take my word for it because my parents were scientists, liberal politicians, and there's this one study out of hundreds of studies. And no matter how we explain it, which is going to be my segue over to Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. No matter how we explain it to their supporters, as long as these politicians can give their supporters a glimmer of hope to hold on to that reaffirms and supports their entire propagandistic existence. You have to understand these people are committed not to any modicum of truth. They're committed to supporting this conservative construct because they've bought into it. They're pot committed. They don't want to know any information that's going to contradict what they believe, which is why you should go pick up my chapter on the conservative religion, where I unpack that, right? I unpack it. It goes beyond their Christian faith. It goes beyond any faith that they have whatsoever. It goes beyond any scientific evidence. It goes beyond any economic proof that their economic policies are detrimental to the United States of America, beyond any actual proof and beyond any moral things that conflicts with their own religion. They hold on to this conservative ideology as if it was their God. And anything else is just the liberal media. Anything else is just liberal politicians trying to take over communism, socialism, fascism, Maoism, Leninism, and every other ism. And so long as snake oil salesmen, charlatans like Ted Cruz can find a way to contort reality just enough to give his rabid religious zealot cretins something to hold on to, they will run with it as if it's the gospel truth, when everyone else in the world with just an ounce of common sense is looking in like, who the hell let these insane people out of the asylum? And not just left them out the asylum, who elected one to be senator of the United States? Worse than that, how is this moron in the third spot Well, I guess if Trump is in the number one spot, it only makes sense that Ted Cruz will be in the number two or the number three spot. I guess so. And I don't even have to talk passionately about the environment, because once you realize the implications of it, you realize we've got a group of people who can look the truth, the damning truth about the future of our planet and say, hell, let's just make it all a wash. And so long as Ted Cruz's parents were scientists, then we can make it all a wash for our supporters. As long as we can make it a wash for our supporters, then there's relatively gridlock. Not even relatively, there's absolutely gridlock and nothing can be done. And so long as nothing is being done, the status quo is maintained. And fossil fuels will reign the day, and the subsidies will still go to them instead of going to support renewable energy. That's the strategy. Conservatism is the art of doing nothing and making sure nobody else does nothing. And I said it just like that because when you're dealing with people with, I would say, the leadership of the Republican Party knows full well what they're doing. They're not dumb. They're actually rather brilliant. They're brilliant enough to create this propaganda that's able to convince a good portion of the United States that science is just wrong because Ted Cruz's mother was a scientist. And he thinks, do you guys see how ridiculous of a world we're dealing with? Not even a world, I'm sorry. How ridiculous of a group of people we're dealing with. And the proof is in the pudding, right? One last thing on Ted Cruz before I move to Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. With the shooting in in Colorado, I believe. There's so many shootings, I don't even know where to attribute the right shooter anymore. So let me just say the Planned Parenthood shooting. At the Planned Parenthood shooting, as he was being arrested, the shooter, Robert Deere, said, "No more baby parts." Pretty conclusive to all of us who've been observing that this guy is referring to the propaganda that has been spewed by, I forgot the name of the organization, but particularly by Carly Fiorina about Planned Parenthood selling body parts for profit. So as he's arrested, he says this, and everyone else is like, damn, another Planned Parenthood shooting because of a right-wing Christian conservative terrorist. For 2.5 days, Republicans were completely quiet on the issue because they had no way to spin it. No way to spin it. There's no way out of this, right? There's no way that you can not even take responsibility for it, but there's no way you cannot have a situation where conservatism is absolutely wrong on something. Someone who's conservative, someone who bought into your ideology, did something because of your ideology that was just as terrifying as any other mass shooting, as anything else that we've encountered. So they couldn't say anything. Because if they said even we apologize, or not even apologize, what the hell am I saying? If they had just said we stand in solidarity with the victims' families in this holiday season, if they had just said that, then it would have left the conversation going and the criticism mounting against the conservative ideology that led to the killings. This is very relevant, so stick with me for a few more seconds and I'll show you where it connects the dots. So instead of paying attention to what the shooter himself said, everyone took Ted Cruz's propaganda, by everyone I mean conservatives, took Ted Cruz's propaganda where he went and he found a voter registration slip for Robert Deere that had him registered as a woman. And he was able to conclude, because of this registration card, that this guy was a transgendered leftist activist. And the reason he shot up Planned Parenthood was because he was a transgendered leftist activist. And just like that, they got something. Who the hell is calling me during my show? I don't even get phone calls this time of night. What the hell? I'm in the middle of my rant. Anyway, ignoring the phone. And it's loud as hell. There we go. It's off. Leftist transgender activists. And so just like that, he gave his supporters something that would reinforce their psychopathy, their insanity, something that would reinforce their delusions, something that would reinforce their idea and the idea in their mind that everything wrong in the world is from the left. So it's not possible in their mind. It's just not possible anymore for someone who is a good, upstanding conservative to do something wrong in the United States. Anything that was done that was wrong had to come from the left. And so just like that, he gave them a little bone to bite on, and they ran around the country with this piece of propaganda that was completely contradictory to the words that came out of the shooter's mouth. So in other words, they're saying, ignore the evidence that everyone else can agree on. Ignore the evidence that everyone else sees. Take my word for it, because the word that I'm giving you makes you feel good and reinforces your insanity and reinforces your bigotry and reinforces your fears, reinforces your apprehensions, reinforces all of those suspicions that you have in your mind. And reinforces you and does not allow you to ever have a moment of reflection, because the most powerful thing in the world is a moment of reflection when you consider the reality that I might be wrong. That's the most powerful thing in the world. That transcends any science, any religion, any ideology. It is the greatest tool in the world, is to take a moment and sit down in a quiet space without anyone else talking to you and say, wait a minute, could I be wrong? That's the most dangerous thing to conservatism, is to have a moment, is for their voters to have a moment where they stop and think, could we have been wrong about this? Or could our words have led to this? Could what we have been shouting, are we actually the monster that we've been trying to fight? And that is why they're not passive ever. They're so proactive in their propaganda to head off any opportunity for their voters to have a moment of reflection, to consider that they could be wrong about something. Because if they ever ask themselves that question, then conservatism, as it is right now today, would completely fall apart. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and/or question?
Hey, Ben, it's Pedro. How's it going?
It's going great, Pedro. What's on your mind, man? Thanks for the call.
No problem, as always. But I wanted to touch on this, the impending fascism of the right wing. I touched on this before, not that you should have to remember it, but we have to somehow convey to the other side, we as progressives, the Progressive Army, has to convey to the other side that they are so few degrees away from the fanatical religious jihadists that they hate. Because, and I'm not saying this because we disagree, because discourse is always the best way to figure out how to compromise, how to make things best for the whole population. What the facts and the truth, that they will do anything and everything to seem correct on the onset, and they will be swayed by any, for example, biblical verse that seems to agree with their confirmation bias or their bigotry, or listen to any leader that seems to portray the idea that he has the right idea because he agrees with them and their bigotry, or their own personal fanaticism, or their own personal prejudice, or their own fears. We somehow, some way, even though I disagree with these people, and in my own personal time, I mock them heavily for their lack of intelligence as they portray themselves. We have to somehow convey to them that they're being swayed so easily because other leaders agree with them. They're so facts and truth and objectivity is antithetical to them.
Yes.
And it's just so distressing because look at the person that's leading. Look at the person that they want to run the country. This kind of person that speaks at a fourth grade level with absolutely no substance.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to sound corny when I say education is a key, but how do we get through to them that they have to think before they speak? It's not that if you are a right wing or a Republican, you're instantly dumb or anything, but we have to somehow reach out to them and say, no, think about, the atrocities that you're agreeing with when you say we shouldn't allow Muslims in the country. Think about the hypocrisy when you say, I want to close all mosques or all Mexicans are rapists. What do we do to make them act like rational thinking humans? What can we do then?
You know what? Thanks for the call, Pedro. Perfect
no problem.
segue. And actually, Pedro, somebody said that I should let you come on and do a segment, and I said, you know what, that'd be cool. We'll call it Vote for Pedro. So,
oh no,
not
that movie. Anything but that, please.
All right, I'm going to unpack that right now on the air for you.
Thanks, no problem.
So that's the problem. That's the fear. That's my concern. My concern is that I think we're dealing with a certain percentage of people who will never, ever care what reality actually says. They won't care. They completely dismiss it. You could tell them that the sky is blue, but if for whatever reason the sky being blue contradicts with conservatism, then they're going to say, stop with your liberal bias, bull. Stop with your political correctness. Stop with all this. The sky is not blue. And maybe they would get brilliant and say that it's the reflection of, I doubt that. But here's the deal. I don't think that it's really going to matter. I'm looking at the data. Grab my phone for me. Thank you, baby. So anyway, looking at the data, this dude calling me. I'm looking at this number. Don't call me during my show. Man, you know what's up. I'm looking at this data from a poll that was just put out based on Donald Trump's statement about banning all Muslims. This just came out today from Bloomberg Politics and Purple Insights. According to this data, 51%. This is scary. I have to put this on the screen. This is that scary. 51% of conservative primary voters. Let me zoom in. This for yourself. 51% of GOP primary voters strongly favor Donald Trump's statement. The question posed this week: Donald Trump called for a temporary ban on all Muslims who are citizens of foreign countries from entering the United States. Do you favor or oppose this proposal? 51% strongly favor. 14 not so strong, but they do favor it. So a total of 65% of GOP primary voters strongly favor. I'm sorry, let me say it correctly. I don't want to misspeak. Favor, whether it's strongly or not so strongly, favor Donald Trump's statement. That is, it gets worse. And I'm going to unpack it a little more. And I wonder if there's a correlation between that and the 68%. Of course, there's a correlation. I want to know if it's a causal relationship between that and the 68% that Donald Trump quoted and said they would follow him to an independent ticket. That's a big percentage, right? And using their, this is actual polling data. So polling data has been pretty accurate. The science behind it is pretty robust. So, conservatives, they wouldn't even challenge this result, right? If it was a result that they didn't like, then they would say, oh, the polling data is never conclusive, when in actuality, polling data is pretty robust, right? The science behind it is. But they agree with Donald Trump. 65% of them do. Now there's 16% who strongly oppose it. And actually, I want to go down a little further. And actually, hang on, let me pull this back on the screen. Here's another problem for America. Who the hell are these 14% of Democratic primary voters who strongly agree? I think that's even a bigger headline. 18% of 14 and 4, 18% of Democratic primary voters favor Donald Trump's statement. I let you know that the idiocy, the ignorance, and the bigotry do not stop with the Republican Party. It crosses ideological lines. But 65% total agree. Now there's 16% who strongly oppose, and maybe those are the folks that everyone was talking about last night. The two Patricks called in saying that Bernie Sanders needs to go out after the Donald Trump vote. Here's the other question, and then I'll get to the caller. Does this proposal make you more likely to vote for Donald Trump, less likely to vote for Donald Trump, or does it not have an impact on whether or not you would vote for Donald Trump? 37% said because of this policy, they are more likely to vote for Donald Trump. There's another chart in here. There's another point in here. And this is after this statement here. I'm highlighting it for you on YouTube. I'll read it for you on Spreaker. This is the statement that they included in the explanation in the interview, in the poll. Leaders from across the political spectrum have condemned this policy, saying that banning members of an entire religion from entering the country goes against everything we believe in as Americans, and it will make our country less safe by alienating the allies we need to fight ISIS. So despite this clarification, despite this added piece of information, you have 65% of Donald Trump voters, of GOP primary voters, who said that they favor this policy. And then you have 37% of those who say that they are even more likely to do. I have to point that out, because at the end of the day, if this is what they want, they will stop at nothing in terms of denying reality that contradicts this. Anything that goes against what they want, they're willing to throw it out. And I guess it goes down to the basic premise is, if you're offered a new piece of information, would you change your mind? I think anyone rational and reasonable would say, yes, if there's new information that contradicts what I currently believe, I would change my mind. They're even staunch atheists, right? And I'm not trying to get into this conversation, but I'm just giving it to you anecdotally. There's staunch atheists that said that if they had new information that contradicted their positions, they would believe in God if there was something, their data that could be presented to them. But you have these conservatives and about 6% of Democrats, 14% of Democrats, who, no matter how ridiculous a position makes them look, no matter how the data contradicts what they're saying, no matter how the decision will be detrimental to them, they want the decision so badly. It's a visceral response. It is an emotional attachment to an idea that is detrimental to them. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Peace, light, love, and blessings to Professor General Benjamin Dixon of the Progressive Army. How are you?
I'm doing great. Wow, that was a hell of an introduction. I need to let you come on and introduce me more. What's going on? What's on your mind? Thanks for the call.
This is Camilla from Poland, also known as Davin's mom.
Ah, thanks. I recognize you. Once you start your greeting, I knew who you were from your greeting.
First, I have to say, Davin woke me up the other morning before he went to school, and he said to me, "Mom, let's talk about politics." I said, "Okay." Mm-hmm. And he said, "Bernie Sanders is going to win." I said, "Is he?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Bernie Sanders is a great person." He said, "Hillary Clinton is going to lose."
All right.
And something I taught him, Donald Trump is an idiot.
Get them started early. Get them started early. I like that.
That's right. I wanted to call in because I was going to call in on Monday because as a science major, history to me, I wasn't a really big fan, but to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been.
Right.
And I have to give a shout out to my history teachers who have been awesome. I have about 3 or 4 of them who really made me appreciate history. But I have to say, your history lesson last week was a cut above the rest.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
That whole post show was awesome. I have so much to say. I'm going to call back tomorrow because I want to go back into your history lesson from last week. But I had to just say, since your show and We the Progressive Army, I'm going to become a Patreon. It's just, as a college student with 2 children, sometimes life gets in the way. It's the holiday season. I'm going to donate. I promise you, I'm going to donate. I have my mom and grandma donating. But I wanted to say, since we speak truth into power, let us talk about the diaspora here. Mm-hmm. Because what is going on with Donald Trump and the rest of his followers, his sheeple, the people who need to take the red pill and step outside of the matrix.
Yeah.
They ignore the simple fact that we are all Africans. Let us start there. The mitochondrial Eve came from Africa. We are all Africans. This is all just a showing how you divide and you conquer.
Yeah.
We're all the same people. Being a medical student, I have done autopsies, okay? And I know that inside we all look exactly the same, except for when there is an anomaly or disease.
Right.
We all look exactly the same. And we're coming together. Bernie Sanders is bringing us together. The world needs this right now. And I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody. I'm sorry to take up so much time, but I love the movement between you and H.A. Goodman. It's just like, it's so refreshing. It's so refreshing. You have no idea.
Thanks so much. I really do appreciate it. And you know what? You make sure you call in tomorrow so we can finish up and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the rest of that history.
I definitely will. I can't wait. I'm going to go do I'm a Scientist. So another thing really quickly. Let me give a shout out to all of the historically Black colleges and universities across the country. This is to you, Justice Scalia. I don't understand why we have not rewritten the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, why all of these Supreme Court justices get to sit on for infinitive amounts of time. Get these geezers out of here. Right. Let me give a shout out to Cheney University, Lincoln University, Hampton University, Tuskegee University, Alabama State, Bethune-Cookman, Oregon State.
Hell Wildcats.
All of these colleges that my family have attended. And because I needed to go the cheaper route because I decided to be a non-traditional student, I had to go outside the country to Poland where it's cheaper abysmally. But, I always got to enjoy the HBCU experience because my mom went to Morgan State.
Yep. Right there in Baltimore, right?
And I got to experience all of that. Dell State too as well. My bad.
No problem.
So with all that peace, light, love, and blessings to everyone, and I'll call back tomorrow.
All right. Thanks so much for the call. And not that I'm a fan of Florida A&M University, but my wife went to Florida A&M University and I went to Bethune-Cookman University. So we were rivals. And yes, I said Hell Wildcats. That was our university. So you know what? That's the other component because I kind of get fixated on the illogical arguments or the implications of the argument, even though it may be not always illogical. The implications of what Scalia said was he was damning all of Black intellect, but he also damned HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. And when I tell you, I went to both at HBCU. My first 3 years were at first 2 years were at Bethune-Cookman University, and then my last couple of years were at you notice that's my last couple of years were at a state school. The education at the HBCU was far more rigorous, far more intense. So go to hell, Scalia. Kiss all of our Black asses. How about that? All of our progressive asses. All right. Did I lose where I was? We were talking about Trump and the fact that their supporters, they want this confirmation bias. They don't want anything else but this. This is what they like. They live and breathe. And so here's the last thing. I was watching the segment from Rachel Maddow with Bernie Sanders, and I was listening to I was reconsidering the arguments from the two Patricks last night, and Pat McNeil and Blanc. I don't even know you guys' names, full names. And I'm listening to, and I read a Salon article. I read a Salon article this morning that had the same argument, saying that if Bernie Sanders focuses on the Donald Trump voters, he could pull them in because they're angry. They're angry at the system. They're angry about their economic plight. They're angry about all of the money and politics, all the things that Bernie Sanders actually stands for and fights against and fights for, are right in line with what would be the solution to their problems. Now, on the surface, I agree with you guys, and I agree with Bernie Sanders. I agree with the article on the surface. But once you realize that 65% of Republican primary voters support Donald Trump, no matter how ridiculous he is, then you have to conclude that they are not interested in anything objective. They're not interested in anything that's even in their best interest. They're interested in these things that are going to feed them emotionally, even if it's to the detriment of their being, even if it means going against Obamacare, which is going to cause them, if Obamacare fell apart, then they estimate an additional 10,000 people a year would die because of that, right? But they're so dedicated to their opposition, or not even the opposition, they're so dedicated to maintaining this conservative construct that they're willing to die for it. They elected in Kentucky a governor who promised to pull down the statewide healthcare exchange connect, because what he was saying fed them emotionally, even to their own economic and health detriment. I just don't see. I honestly do not see these people accepting the reality that Bernie Sanders' platform is in their best interest. I think that they will reject it. Matter of fact, if you read the comment sections on something, because the comment sections are real life. I'm sorry. Twitter's real life and the comment sections are real life. If you read the comment sections on these articles discussing whether or not Bernie Sanders can get the supporters, Trump supporters, you will find that they are repulsed at the idea of aligning with a socialist, communist, leftist, Obamaite, and everything else. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question? 202, I've got you live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question? All right, 202, I don't have you, so feel free to call back. My lines are clear, 857-600-0518. So to me, I feel as though they are not going to care about what's in their best interest, because they've never voted for their best interest in the last 30, 40 years. The entire book, What's the Matter with Kansas, unpacks the reality that they would rather vote against their own economic best interest in exchange for their ideology that makes them feel good. All right, call, let's try this again. You're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hello?
Yes, that's you. I've got you live. What's your name?
Okay, this is Solomon, first time caller.
Solomon, first time caller. Glad to have you on board. What's on your mind?
Yeah, just to hop on to your conversation about Bernie. And when I think about how he is targeting Trump voters, in a lot of the articles they talk about it, they're the kind of people who say, I like Trump, but I see Bernie as a second option. And I've read that in a couple articles. And I think that Trump has gotten such a large amount of appeal. Like, when we think about it, he's gotten millions, if not tens of millions of people in his base at this point of voters. And so there are those people who go to his rallies and cheer when he says he's going to expel all Muslims from being able to enter this country. But there are others who are union workers and conservatives who may not agree on a lot of social issues, but they liked Trump for what he was saying early on. When Trump was a lot more talking about economic messages, he talked about trade deals being bad and everyone's foolish for accepting trade deals. He talked a lot more about those types of issues than he does about Muslims and foreign policy that he does now.
Right.
And I think a lot of those voters, they have a lot more potential to move to Bernie than the kind of people who are there for purely his fascism, purely for his racial.
So let's use this data that I was quoting earlier from the poll that they just took, depending asking whether or not they supported his policy, right? So the 65% said they're either strongly or they not so strongly, but they still favored 65%. That does leave the strongly opposed crowd, right? So you have those who strongly oppose it, 16%. So the question is, this is the question of the hour: are those 16%? Are they reachable, and can we reach them without betraying our progressive values? What do you think? I'll listen to a voice that's contrary to mine. Go ahead.
I think so. If we're talking about a general election scenario, I think if Bernie's smart, he can reach some of those people. He can reach it the same way he talked to a couple of conservatives. He's had a couple of rallies. One I think I linked to you earlier while he was in Iowa, who was a conservative who was kind of an anomaly because he voted for Obama once, and I think 2008. But his main problem is he sees the government and the IRS as burdens, as they attack small businesses. And Bernie didn't even miss a beat. He even went, "You're right. They attack you because the IRS is too afraid to attack large corporations, and so they bully small businesses with burdensome regulations and audits."
Right.
And he got immediate applause from that guy, and he loved him. And I think if he uses that strategy of economic fairness, of standing up for the middle guy, it'll work. Because if you look in Vermont, he has that appeal with Vermont Republicans. Vermont Republicans, when they look at what Fox News talks about, what Bernie Sanders, and they know their own experience with him, they choose their own experience every time. They've done a couple documentaries before his campaign about why Vermont Republicans like him so much. He's so popular there that they put him on the ballot in a Vermont Republican poll, and I think he was tied with Donald Trump and ahead of Ben Carson for first place in the Republican primary for president.
All right.
Because
so let's
don't agree with him on social issues, but they agree with him on economic ones.
Well, so that's the other thing, though. That's the other thing about it. Solomon, thanks so much for the call, man. I'm not going to cast judgment on it yet. What the hell did I just press? I didn't press the right button. This is the button I meant to press. That one. Thanks so much for the call, man. I have to do an autopsy of those voters. Postmortem analysis. These are the sons of the same people who left the Democratic Party in the first place in the 60s. They left voting in their best interest with their unions because of the split on race issues. I believe it was the UAW. For the first time, and I think it was 1964, a large percentage of their paid union members voted with the Republican Party for the first time, 1968, not 1964. They left their economic best interest because of their disagreement on social issues. And in 1968, those social issues were civil rights, the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act back in 1964, 1965. Those are the same people that are now probably the ones who are saying, I like Donald Trump because he just says what he wants to say, but I don't particularly like this idea of Muslims being kept out of our country. I think that is a very dangerous group to try to court, because they're in the Republican Party for a reason. They're not just there because they've been there all their lives. Matter of fact, some of them used to be Democrats, some of the older ones. there is going to be an issue that I could put it like this. To win those voters, there will be issues that Bernie Sanders will no longer be able to speak with the confidence and the same passion that he has been speaking on. I think those voters are going to pigeonhole him a little bit, if not a lot bit, because you have to understand where they came from. Those union type, blue collar, steel mill guys who go home and don't watch Fox News, but they watch the football game. And they don't get engaged in politics a lot, so they need a very simplified version of their politics. And they're not going to sit here and listen to the complexities that we delve into. They're going to take the easy talking points from Fox News. Those are the same guys who left the Democratic Party in '68. They left the UAW. Actually, they stayed with the UAW and still voted against a party that was going to destroy it, relatively speaking. The question that has to be answered before I can before I can buy into this idea is, what will Bernie Sanders have to sell out to get those voters? Because they are in the Republican Party for a reason. They're not just there because they accidentally registered as a Republican. My friend, Patrick McNeil, how's it going, man?
Hey, I'm good, Ben. I'm good. Hey, look, I know we're in overtime, so I'll talk fast. The issue that I have is that I'm not looking at the 65% of people who are going to vote for Trump anyway. What I'm looking at is that Trump's people are made up of Republicans, which we all know, Democrats, or those Dixiecrats as you speak of, and also some independents that are out there. And I think the balance has to be struck somehow, some way, in which you don't lose integrity you don't lose the integrity of who you are and what you stand for. It was just an interesting idea. It was the last thing I expected Bernie Sanders to say the other night.
Well, actually, it's
saying,
not. Let me cut you off right there. It didn't surprise me. Let me tell you why it doesn't surprise me. It's because it's the same reason I said in the summer. That Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump have something in common, and that something they have in common is populism. Right? Populism can cross ideological differences, right? It goes right or to the left. So that Bernie Sanders is a populist. He can communicate an economic populist message that should resonate with them. The question is, what has prevented them from seeing their political, their economic best interests all of this time? Because they're not new to the political world. They're not new to these debates. So we need to unpack that voting block and see, why is it that they are there? And is it something that is tenable in a progressive ideology?
That's a good point. And again, I won't argue with it. It's just that it just caught me, and I'll take it. I'll use you as wisdom. Is that I think you had a very valid point that it's populism. People are stuck and they're sick and tired of these extremes that we have, and everybody is placating to the middle because they're politicians. That's what they're born, and they're bred that way. Trump and Bernie are they're not opposites of the same coin, but they come from so far on the end of the spectrum that they give people hope, and no one in the middle seems to have seems to be able to gravitate a robust number of people toward hope. Hillary is doing it by forcing everybody to cash. She's cashing in every chip. She's forcing everybody, whoever owed them a political favor or anything else, to pay up now.
Yeah,
she checking everything in right now. So she's banking everything that if she can swallow up, or she's actually trying to do what Trump is doing, take all of the air out of the room so you don't leave enough room for anybody else to breathe. Again, I totally don't agree with Trump. This statement that he made is absolutely asinine. I mean, but as I shared earlier, the thing that gets me is that I just don't know. I don't know where else does Bernie go. And from just a straight political point, where else does Bernie go to get people who would consider him who are not bought into the democratic machine
Mhm,
and who are
mhm.
willing to give somebody who's outside of the norm an opportunity, but who ain't as crazy as
It's-
Trump.
Okay, let me do this. I need to do a little housekeeping here. You can stay on the line because we can finish up with a little chat. Joseph
Okay.
G on Twitter. Feel free to call in 857-600-0518. And I see you have some disagreement with me, and trust me, we'll have a reasonable and rational conversation. But I'd rather do it on the air. I can't tweet a debate during the middle of the show. I also want to give a shout out to Michael Solomon. Michael Solomon said this: I love Benjamin Dixon and his show, but I fear we're stereotyping and beyond humanizing. And he said the disconnect here is that Bernie is not pandering. He's reaching across the aisle with information, offering to educate. Bernie is encouraging us to educate our neighbors. Patrick, I'll let you respond to that, and then I'll respond to it.
So the first and foremost is that I don't think you can't educate the heart. This goes beyond that. What you're talking about we're talking about heart issues because we're talking about fear. Fear makes no sense whatsoever. That's why trying to rationalize fear never makes it. People are literally scared. The only thing that these commentators say that I agree with on some of this stuff is that they're scared.
Mhm.
The American public is scared. Now, here's the funny part about it. They're not scared of people who look like him, who crazy as all get out, who killed those people at Planned Parenthood. But they are totally scared
That's a
of
good one.
somebody
That's a
who
good
has
one.
an ideology which says that we want to destroy America.
Yeah.
They scared as hell of that. And so again, I don't think it's an intellectual argument that you can have. I think you truly have to reach for the heart of someone and that they grab it from there. Because again, I think that's the only thing that moves people, especially when you're on a polar. It's something else if you somewhere where you can capitulate somewhere in the middle.
I tell you
no,
what.
We're talking about polars here. So that's how I would respond to Mr. Solomon, who I believe does some great arguments on his line.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. I tell you what I do. Thanks for the call, Patrick. I tell you what I do.
Not a problem, man. Keep doing what you do, my friend.
Will do. Thanks a lot, man. I will table this one more time. You guys are I would have to give these caveats. Here are the caveats. Number one, we just recognize it's just a statistical fact based on the polling data. We're not talking about the majority of them. We're talking about 16% if we're lucky. Someone said, I think Dust Puppy said last night, 16%, 10% is enough to win. Okay, so there's a potential of 16% there. So we have something to work with. Number two, we have to answer the question of why they have been voting against their own best economic interests for over 40 years. Because this to me represents the group that normally would align with left-wing economic policies, with things that are good for unions, the blue collar guys, the guys who are chilling at home, watching the game and are hardworking, right? We have to answer that question. It was the case. It's just a historical fact that the reason they left in the first place was because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 1965 and some of the deals that were made post 1964-65. So they left the Democratic Party for social issues. Now, that was 50 years ago. Things could be totally different now. But why are they still there? What is keeping them there? Is it an education thing? I think it's a re-education thing. I think the only way you could possibly pull this off is if you help them to understand how much they've been lied to, how much they have been fed propaganda, how much they have been voting against their own best interest, and for what, in exchange for what. But we also must agree that there are some potential pitfalls to this. It is a very tumultuous trajectory, if I could alliterate. There are mines, there are IEDs in the middle of this path for Bernie. And those destructive things are going to be social issues. They are going to be LGBT rights. They're going to be Black Lives Matter. It's going to be things that they are uncomfortable with. because and I'm making this conclusion based on the fact that if they know they're voting against their best economic interests, there has to be a reason that they're there. They're going to be religious concerns. A lot of them are going to be evangelicals, right? Are the things, how is he going to navigate those things? Are those things now going to be negotiable for these people? And I don't say these people in a derogatory way. I'm saying these people in a very specific way. That 16% that strongly disagree with Donald Trump on this. Are they going to be able to align themselves with an ideology that is opening and affirming to LGBTQ, to Black Lives Matter, to Hispanics, to the Dreamers? Are they able to do that? Because if they're not, then it might be a non-starter from the beginning. All right. We're already on overtime, so it doesn't matter. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, business, Patrick Blanc from Myanmar. I had a call. I had to pull the side of the road just to make this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to
be careful
look
on the road.
beyond Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're focusing way too much on Bernie Sanders and his potential candidacy. The way I view it is it's too late for Bernie. He's not going to convince them in time for them to vote for a progressive movement. I'm thinking long-term strategy here. We have to engage with those people because Republicans have done the same thing. They've waged a 50-state strategy for years.
Right.
This is the reason why you can have Republicans like Chris Christie and otherwise Democratic states, because they have engaged the Democratic Party to the point where we've decided collectively in the Clinton years to move the party towards the center.
Right.
Not as a compromise position, as our starting position. They have convinced Democrats to go against their own interests, to deregulate Wall Street, to welfare reform, to tough on crime. So it is possible. This shows that you can do that. So we have to reverse that course by starting with Howard Dean started when he was DNC chair, which was reversed by Wasserman Schultz, is really starting to engage them on the long-term strategy. And that's just my point for today.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned that on your call yesterday, Patrick, and you said that you said that it has to be bigger than Bernie, and that this has to go beyond. Okay, Patrick, from that perspective, if we look at the long game and not getting enough votes for Bernie, then I can agree with that strategy. In fact, that's the entire point of my show in a lot of regards, right? I'm trying to unpack it. Some people need a gut check. So sometimes I'm really hard. Sometimes I'm an asshole. Sometimes, but in general, I try to present things as straightforward as I possibly can, because I want to convince some of these people that I know are good people that have just been lied to for a very long time. But I don't think, and I agree with you, that it can't be done by November 2016, because we're dealing with 50 years of propaganda, starting with Joseph McCarthy, right? The Red Scare. Are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party, right? They've been building on this that's not even 50 years. That was like 70 years ago now. So it's been a long time process. It would require for Bernie to pull this off successfully. I think somebody called it a certain type of politics. I can't think of the word, but basically it would require just attracting them over without re-educating them, and just pulling them over without actually offering them this time to reflect on the fact that they have been propagandized for so long. That just pulling them over without addressing the issues that they still have hangups on, right? How can we bring them over? If they're stuck on family values as defined by conservatism, then they will not be at a rally with LGBT activists. If they don't address those things, then I think it's almost like a minefield for Bernie Sanders. And yes, Donald Martin has a good question here. I'll pick that up. And yes, Michael Solomon said, thanks, Patrick. The Democratic Party is a villain in this story as well. Right. I absolutely agree, which is why I look at, I honestly, to be honest with you, I look at Hillary Clinton, I look at Bill Clinton, and some of Barack Obama. I look at them as the same as George H.W. You know, I don't look at them exactly the same as George W. because he went further to the right, but I look at them as a continuation of George H.W. George H.W. was for all intent, he raised taxes from back to undo what Ronald Reagan did, the damage that Ronald Reagan did. And then Bill Clinton raised them a little bit more, but they were, you know, they were fiscally and socially conservative. Barack Obama was relatively socially conservative up until it became popular for everyone to accept LGBT rights and marriage equality. So they tacked to the right in order to hold on to that white majority that at the time, this majority of angry, of not angry, but fearful, scared voters who were afraid of the world changing around them and underneath them. And all of a sudden, all these new faces that don't look like anything that they've ever had to live with and work next to in equality. Right, we'll leave everything else. We'll leave all the Jim Crow. We'll leave that conversation to the side, right? But you know, eventually they're gonna have to answer that too. But they're not used to the world as it's shaping, and so they're afraid. They're terrified, and so they hang on to. I think Donald, if I go back up, Donald was talking about in the chat room that they're not culturally liberal folks, and that they place their family value issues ahead of their income issues. I have to agree with Donald 100% on this. They are voting for the Bible, despite the fact that they're neither getting the Bible nor are they getting economics. They're losing on the things they felt were socially important, and they're losing on economics. So the question is, can they ever come to terms with those family values, those things that they're angry about, their anger at Black people for taking their jobs? This is what Bernie said himself, right? That they're angry at Black people for taking their jobs. They're angry at Hispanic people for taking their jobs. They're angry at Islam. They're angry at everything because of their economic situation. So they're projecting their anger in the wrong place. The question is, can they get over that anger in order to hear the economic message? I had one more thing that Donald asked. Hang on one second. I think it was a good question for us to close out on. Bear with me, folks, while I find this. Donald Martin in YouTube said, Ben, you actually have a relatable journey. How did you get to the point where your cultural conservatism became less important politically than other issues? I hate to sound cliche. This is going to sound cliche. I asked myself one day, how is it that I can march next to LGBTQ activists, be a Christian, and align with them when it goes against what the Bible says? That was the first thing. Remember when I said the most powerful thing is to sit down and consider, maybe I'm wrong about something. And I was open at that point to say, maybe I'm wrong about my political affiliation, or perhaps I'm wrong about my opposition to LGBTQ rights. I was open to wherever that journey took me. I sat down and asked myself that question because I owed it to myself to answer that question, right? Instead of being at an LGBTQ rally and questioning, why am I here? Or being at a rally for whoever and there's LGBTQ activists there and saying, why am I? I owed it to myself to answer myself that question. Once you ask yourself a question, you unpack it. You start getting evidence. You start asking more questions. You start doing research. I started doing interviews. I started talking to people that I knew that were LGBTQ. I talked to friends of my political science program. I talked to people at my church that I knew were gay or lesbian. And I just started putting all the evidence on the table. I'm like, how does this work? How does this work for you? How does this work for you? And then finally, I came to the realization that my position has been hypocritical for a very long time. That I've been looking at, and I'm not using this as a pejorative, but I just have to say it like, I've been looking at these people as if they were some type of outcast and abomination, because that's what the Bible told me. And then I realized I just have not been reading the entire Bible. I read over into another chapter in Proverbs that listed out all the other abominations to God, right? And 6 out of the other 7 abominations, well, not 6, I can't say that, that's a little much, but 4 out of the other abominations I was guilty of. And so it was a combination of just buying into what I've always been taught, combination of not even reading the full Bible to realize that the Bible condemns me just as much as it condemns everybody. And then just because I'm doing, the life that I'm living, I had to come to terms with the fact that my position on it was wrong, that I had no valid reason as a citizen of the United States, no valid reason to oppose gays and lesbians from getting the equal rights that I have. And in fact, as I studied more, I realized that even as a Christian, I am doing the wrong thing by trying to force other people to live according to a code that they don't voluntarily want to live by. That process took about 6 months of me looking at myself in the mirror and asking the question of why. Why do I believe this? And then once you ask yourself the question why, then everything else starts falling apart. Your world around you falls apart, and you have to be brave enough to let the world around you fall apart so something new can form. And you realize that this new thing is not only better, but it makes more sense. It makes more sense in regards to my faith, and it makes more sense with regard to my politics. That process is a long process, and I have to tie it back to this, guys. I have to tie it back to this, and then I'm going to get out of here. That is the reason why politicians like Ted Cruz will never give their supporters the opportunity or the chance to have a moment of reflection and say, what if I'm wrong about this? Because that's the most powerful way to change the world. So here's a question. All right. Enough of that, my self-reflection of my journey. And it's actually not even just LGBTQ rights, by the way. It's also confronting my own personal misogyny, right? The things in me, the things in me that were that made me a misogynist. There's some, growing up in the Baptist church as a black man, you're not necessarily, you're definitely not a feminist by default. All right, but here's the last thing I have to say this. Our best option is this. I can boil it down to one question. If you get in a conversation with a conservative, ask them what is one thing that their ideology has been wrong on. That if they are a thinking human being and a decent human being, that one question should trigger a chain of thoughts, or at least a conversation. Ask them one thing that their ideology has been wrong on. And if they say nothing, then really ask them, when's the last time that they have been perfect? Or when's the last time that their wife has been perfect or their husband has been perfect? Nobody's perfect. Therefore, no ideology is perfect. Every ideology has had something that they've been wrong on. And maybe that's a good starting point for you to unpack it from there. What's one thing that your ideology has been wrong? Now, while we're doing that, I'm going to ask all of you to answer the same question. What is one thing that your ideology has been wrong on? Folks, Yeah, no, I was. I don't mind chatting a little bit more because I'm feeling kind of good tonight, but I would like to unpack some of these things a little bit more after this show. Join the Progressive Army, go to the BPD show, the BenjaminDixonShow.com. Actually, my announcers say it better than me anyway, so let me just let my announcer say it. Misogynist light, not a straight out misogynist. I just had some really male chauvinist tendencies, and reflection can get you out of anything.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Crazy mother.
If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD Show and support the Benjamin Dixon Show.
All right, YouTube. Dust Puppy said, when are you going to talk about the poll you did? Dust Puppy, I have I'm trying to process the data. I did the data. I have the data in a CSV file, and I need to get it uploaded into a different system that can process word analysis. But I've read through every single question and every single response. The survey he's referring to is a former Christian survey. I did a former Christian survey because I wanted to unpack some of the reasons that people left the faith. And you would be amazed at some of these stories. I'm thinking that if I can't get the data analysis going, that I may just put them in a collection of stories, because the stories are so compelling as to why people left the faith. And some of them didn't leave the faith because they stopped believing. They left the faith because of how the faith treated other people. That's one of the number one thing. Pedro, thanks so much for the call. I did see that. And let's see what else. Pedro's point. The one thing about Christians who turn away. That you taught obedience. You can't be pro-black and be anti-LGBT. Thank you, Leslie. You're right about that. I think one step forward we can all take is to curation is willing to admit that we all have some implicit. You know what, Todd? I can't agree with you more. The most difficult thing for people to do is to just admit, to confront themselves in the mirror and say that I've been wrong about something. Because once you have that conversation in your head, man, you ask yourself, what else have I been wrong about? What else have I had biases towards? Oh, for real, Ben, I'm drunk, so I won't call you in again. It came down to choosing between Jesus' teachings or Old Testament writing. And thank you, Dust Pipe. Actually, you put it much better than me. That was quick and succinct. My decision came down to Jesus' teachings. It did. It really did. Ben Dixon, the origin story. Let's see. Democratic Party chose the third way. Yep, that's pretty much. Any other questions? He's an isolated. My dad always says even Jesus disliked organized. He did. And I think we'd have to do a separate show. I can't even unpack all the different things that you realize once you start looking at your faith with a critical eye. You start looking at it from an analytical perspective, and you start looking at it from the Jesus perspective, right? You look at it through the lens of Christ, and you realize, man, there's so much about organized religion today that is completely antithetical to who Christ was. So that's where my faith is right now. So I don't really do organized religion except for going to church and having a good time with the people. I do that because it's fun and I enjoy it. But in terms of my personal faith, it's just that, it's personal. I think that's all the good questions here, folks. Did I leave anybody out? Anything here? Anything good here? Bernie almost over the third way. That's it, folks. There are no other questions. If all hearts and minds are clear, holla at your boy. I'll see you guys next time.